It was Charles Darwin who more than 150 years ago stated, "It is not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most adaptable to change." This statement, nevertheless, applies not only to species but also to organizations, today more than ever. If the evolutionary phenomenon occurs fortuitously in species through mutation and natural selection, in organizations it occurs consciously and intentionally through the decisions of top executives. It is these decisions, or lack of them, that make an organization more adept or resistant to change, that is, more or less adaptive. And in a world as dynamic as the one we currently live in, this means being more or less competitive. In other words, adaptive capacity is today the main source of competitive advantage for organizations. If we want to understand the concept of adaptive capacity and learn how to strengthen it, we need to revisit history and analyze how the modern organization has evolved. We need to understand the different dimensions that comprise today's organizations and how these dimensions emerged over time. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, the organizations that distinguished themselves from the rest were those who developed their structure, the equivalent of the human skeleton, structure in terms of roles, responsibilities, systems, and processes. As Frederick Taylor, forefather of management science, stated at that time, "In our work scheme, we don't ask for initiative in our men. We don't want any initiative. All we want is for them to obey the orders we give them, to do what we say, and to do it quickly." His greatest disciple, Henry Ford, expressed this sentiment even more directly. "Why is it that whenever I ask for a pair of hands, a brain comes attached?" And the fact is that in his automobile assembly line, Ford didn't need for people to think, much less feel. What he needed was for people to execute what others had already thought and designed. But Ford's formula of success gradually became insufficient when General Motors began producing colored cars. GM's colored cars started to take over the classic 4T, which continued being black. Executing well wasn't enough anymore. A greater degree of thinking was needed. From 30s onwards, the organizations that distinguished from the rest were those that placed emphasis on strategy, the equivalent of the brain in the human body. Alfred Sloan, General Motors' mythical CEO during the 40s, put it this way: "Only by increasing our knowledge we can progress, or, more accurately, survive." As the organization grew, however, it became evident that concentrating strategic thinking and decision-making at the top was a significant limitation. Having more people at various levels making decisions and undertaking initiatives was increasingly necessary. This is how the concept of talent, the equivalent of the heart in the human body, gained momentum, and the organizations that distinguished from the rest were those who situated talent at the center of their activities. Jack Welch, General Electric's great CEO during the 80s and 90s, epitomized this best when he stated, "My main job was developing talent. I was like a gardener providing water and nourishment to our top 750 executives. Of course, I had to remove some weeds as well." Having significant talent in an organization can easily lead to harmful dynamics of inflated egos, personal agendas, and silos. Bringing together talent is not an easy task, and organizational structure is insufficient in addressing this challenge. The organizations that began distinguishing themselves from others in the 90s addressed this challenge through culture, the equivalent of the blood in the human body. It's culture that allows talent to deploy itself effectively, to play as a team, to privilege collective needs over individual ones. Lou Gerstner, IBM's CEO during the 90s, an architect of its profound transformation, put it this way: "During my decade at IBM, I realized that culture isn't just one part of the game, it is the game." But the story does not end there. In recent years, the idea of purpose, equivalent to the soul of the human body, has gained increasing force, and today's cutting-edge companies distinguish themselves on that basis. Their existence isn't defined solely by earning money. Profitability is simply a means to realizing a deeper aspiration of leaving a legacy that is larger than itself. These organizations question the reason for their existence and define themselves beyond what they do and how they do it. A good example is Apple, whose founder, Steve Jobs, put it this way: "My passion has been to build an enduring company where people are motivated to make great products that could make a difference in the lives of millions of people. Every else is secondary." From an evolutionary perspective, the companies that have distinguished themselves today are those that have developed greater adaptive capacity. This is the result of flexible structure, a strategy open to experimentation, a body of talent that plays as a team, a culture adept at facing challenges rather than avoiding them, and a purpose that inspires and connects to people's aspirations. The challenge of building an organization like this is not only necessary and possible, it is deeply gratifying. In the end, it means transitioning from managing a business to leading people.